The cameras flashed, the world completely froze, and just like that, the music industry had its biggest, most devastating mystery.
Yeah, a tragedy that Hollywood and the world are still obsessing over decades later.
Welcome to this deep dive. Join us as we uncover music industry shakeups, legal drama, and the real stories behind the fame.
Exactly. And if you are loving these twists, make sure you are subscribed because we have some crazy stories ahead.
You really don't want to miss what we're getting into today. We are unpacking a headline that honestly sounds like a movie plot. Courtney Love's shocking demand for Kurt Cobain's death file revealed.
It is a wild story. Today we are opening up a stack of incredibly intense, recently surfaced documents right alongside you.
Right. Our mission here is to look at the raw source material surrounding the tragic 1994 death of Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain.
We are pulling directly from historical FBI files, official Seattle Police Department case reports, and even some extensive Washington State court documents.
Not to mention the detailed medical autopsy reports. It is just a massive archive.
It really is. And we want to help you understand what is actually in these files, separating the hard forensic reality from, decades of myth.
So to start, I want you to imagine for a second that you are the chief of police in a major American city.
Okay. Pretty stressful job on a normal day.
Right. And usually when a tragedy strikes involving a massive public figure, people immediately demand answers. They want transparency.
Oh, absolutely. The public expects to see all the receipts.
But in October 1995, the chief of the Seattle Police Department, Norm Stamper, received a formal legal letter with a completely unprecedented demand.
And this came from a lawyer representing Courtney Love, Cobain's widow, right?
Exactly. And the letter wasn't asking for a new investigation. It was actually demanding the police hand over the entire investigation file for Kurt Cobain's death.
Like every photo, every note, every single report.
Yes. And here's the truly shocking kicker. The letter demanded that the police keep 0 copies for themselves.
Wow. 0 copies.
0. Essentially, they were asked to entirely erase the public record of one of the most famous deaths of the 20th century.
That is just a staggering request. I mean, why would a grieving family ask a police department to completely expunge a public record?
Right? It sounds crazy. But to understand the answer, we have to look closely at the hard forensic evidence that prompted this request in the first place.
Not to mention the relentless conspiracy theories that eventually drew in the FBI.
Oh, we're definitely getting to the FBI, but wait until you hear what came next, because the intense legal wars fought to keep his final moments private are just mind-blowing.
Yeah, the courtroom drama alone is intense.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with that 1995 letter. This arrived about 18 months after Cobain was found dead in his Seattle home.
Right, so the initial shock had passed, but the media circus was still in full swing.
Exactly. And according to the documents, Courtney Love's lawyer, Brian Coluscio, wrote this demand stating that the estate fully and completely accepted the police department's ruling of suicide.
So they weren't contesting a single fact of the case.
Not one. They wanted the file purely to prevent anyone from leaking the graphic materials and, profiting off the tragedy.
The estate's position was essentially, look, we agree with your final determination, the case is closed, now surrender the paperwork so the media cannot exploit it.
But if you think about the mechanics of how public records actually work, you quickly realize how impossible that is.
Because it's not just about a grieving family anymore, it's about the integrity of the whole system.
Exactly. Imagine you walk into a massive public library and ask the head librarian to give you the only existing copy of a rare, historically significant manuscript.
Okay.
And then you demand they completely wipe all mentions of that manuscript from their digital catalog so no one can even prove it ever existed.
Right. A public institution simply cannot operate that way. It's against their entire mandate.
Precisely. And the police reaction reflected that exact logic. Retired Seattle Police Captain Neil Lowe, who knew the case intimately, went on record calling the request absurd.
I can imagine. He pointed out the foundational legal reality of police work, right?
Yeah, law enforcement agencies are bound by law to document their official business. They have to maintain those documents as public records.
Because if a police department just handed over the sole copies of a death investigation to a private citizen, it would instantaneously destroy all public accountability.
Exactly. How can the public trust a police department that just, gives away crime scenes?
They can't. So obviously the police flatly denied the request.
They refused to hand over the file, and crucially, they refused to destroy the crime scene photos. But those files didn't just sit frozen in time.
Right, they had to revisit them.
Yeah. Fast forward with me to 2014, the 20th anniversary of Cobain's death. The Seattle Police Department knew the global media was gearing up to ask a million questions.
So they assigned a cold case detective named Mike Sasinski to review the original investigative file, just to make sure all their bases were covered.
And this 2014 review gives us a really fascinating look into the physical degradation of evidence.
It really does, because when Detective Sasinski went down into the records vault, he made this surprising discovery.
What did he find?
Sitting right there in the file were 4 completely undeveloped rolls of 35mm film taken at the scene 20 years prior.
Which, if you think about it, sounds like a massive oversight to a layperson. I mean, undeveloped film just sitting in a vault for 2 decades.
It does sound super strange, but it was actually standard procedure for old cases that didn't result in criminal charges.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they developed the Polaroids for immediate use, but they left the 35mm film undeveloped just to save money.
Okay, that makes sense from a budget perspective, I guess.
But Sasinski knows from his cold case experience that physical film has a shelf life. The Seattle Police Department didn't even process 35mm film anymore.
So what did you do?
He had to take these rolls over to the King County Sheriff's photo lab. And when they finally developed them, every single photo had a heavy, distinct green tint.
Now, if you were looking at these 20-year-old photos of a tragic scene, that green tint could look incredibly eerie.
Oh, absolutely.
But there is a strict chemical explanation for this, isn't there?
Yes, it's purely chemistry. Film stock relies on silver halide crystals and different layers of color dyes, typically cyan, magenta, and yellow.
Okay, getting a little scientific here.
Just a bit. Over decades, those chemical dyes degrade at different rates based on temperature and time. The magenta dye layer is notoriously unstable.
So it fades the fastest.
Exactly. And when you subtract magenta from the color balance, you are left with a strong green and cyan color cast.
So it wasn't some mysterious lighting artifact or, paranormal interference. It was just the physical reality of the film rotting in a vault.
Right. The photo lab actually had to digitally color correct that green tint away.
And once they did, Sasinski sat down, looked at the newly developed photos, the original Polaroids, the autopsy, and the toxicology reports.
And his conclusion 20 years later was identical. The original investigators got it exactly right.
Which forces us to ask, what exactly was in these medical and forensic files that made them so heavily guarded by the police and so desperately sought after by the family?
Well, it comes down to the irrefutable medical evidence. This brings us to the autopsy report prepared by Dr. Nicholas Hartshorn and approved by Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Donald Ray.
And the official cause of death was a contact-penetrating shotgun wound to the head.
Yes. But the toxicology report is where the public's imagination really took off.
Though the toxicology report is the absolute epicenter of the controversy. The documents show the presence of diazepam, which is Valium, and a staggering amount of heroin.
Specifically, a blood morphine level of 1.52 milligrams per liter.
Now, I have to step in here because if you are listening to this and you know anything about pharmacology, your alarm bells are ringing right now.
Oh, for sure.
To give you some baseline context, for a person who does not use opiates, a blood morphine level of just 0.2 or 0.3 milligrams per liter can be entirely lethal.
That is correct. A naive user would likely start breathing long before reaching that 1.52 level.
So on behalf of our listeners, we have to ask the question that conspiracy theorists have been screaming for 30 years.
Let's hear it.
With a morphine level of 1.52 milligrams per liter, which is like 5 to 7 times a normal lethal dose, how could a human being even remain conscious?
It's a great question.
Let alone possess the complex motor skills required to operate a 20-gauge shotgun. I mean, it defies common sense.
It's a highly logical question, and it is the exact question Detective Sasinski took to the King County Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Richard Hariff, during his 2014 review.
Yeah, what did he say?
Dr. Hariff's explanation hinges on the biological mechanism of tolerance.
Break that down for us, because tolerance sounds like a simple word for a very complex biological shift.
It is a profound physical alteration of the brain. When we talk about opiate tolerance, we aren't just saying someone is used to it.
Right, it's not like getting used to spicy food.
Exactly. We are talking about the physical downregulation of mu-opioid receptors in the central nervous system.
So the brain actually changes its structure.
Yes. When a person abuses heroin long-term, their brain physically alters its receptor density and sensitivity to compensate for the constant flood of the drug. The brain is basically trying to maintain homeostasis.
It's kind of like caffeine, right? If you drink 5 shots of espresso every single day, your brain adapts. You can drink a double espresso and go straight to sleep.
That is a perfect analogy.
But if you give that same double espresso to someone who has never touched caffeine, their heart is pounding, their hands are shaking, and they're bouncing off the walls.
The baseline completely shifts. Dr. Harif advised the police that because of this receptor adaptation, tolerance is the single most critical factor when evaluating opiate toxicity.
So the raw numbers don't tell the whole story.
Not at all. A highly tolerant chronic heroin user can achieve and fully physically function at blood levels that would instantly kill a non-user.
Wow.
Therefore, the assumption that Cobain was completely incapacitated is a false premise. It relies on applying the biology of a sober person to the biology of a chronic addict.
That biological reality is heavily supported when you look at the physical mechanics of the scene itself. Let's look at the timeline.
Okay, the timeline is crucial here.
The police found a receipt for $6.95 from a store called Seattle Guns for a box of 20-gauge shotgun shells. And the receipt was dated April 2nd, 1994.
And that timeline was solidly corroborated. Detectives interviewed a driver for Gray Top Taxi who confirmed picking up a male passenger from the Cobain residence on the morning of April 2nd.
And the passenger actually spoke to the driver, right?
Yeah, he explicitly told the driver he needed to buy bullets because his house had recently been burglarized. The driver dropped him off at 145th and Aurora.
Which is the exact location of Seattle Guns.
Yep.
Now, if you are analyzing this like a detective, this taxi ride is a massive problem for conspiracy theorists.
It really is.
You have a verified independent witness placing the victim actively purchasing the exact ammunition used in the death just days prior. It drastically shrinks the window for any elaborate murder plot because the victim is actively facilitating the mechanics of his own death.
And speaking of mechanics, we have to look at the shotgun itself.
Right. What did they find?
The physical layout of the weapon is what we call forensic geometry. The 20-gauge Remington shotgun was found lying on Cobain's chest with the receiver facing up.
And the shell casing.
To his right side, lying on a coat, was a spent yellow shell casing.
Which doesn't sound like much until you understand the physics of a shotgun ejector. Detective Ciesinski actually brought in a Seattle police range armorer to analyze the photos.
Because the ejection pattern is key.
Exactly. If you hold a Remington 20-gauge normally, like up against your shoulder and fire, the ejection port flings the spent casing backward and to the right.
But the casing wasn't found where a normal firing stance would place it.
Right. The range armorer determined that if a person inverts the weapon, pointing the barrel at themselves, grasping the barrel to prevent it from moving, and using their thumb to pull the trigger, the entire weapon pivots in a specific way upon recoil.
And when fired in that exact inverted grip, the ejection port is angled completely differently.
And it ejects the shell casing exactly to the spot on the coat where it was found in the crime scene photos. You just can't fake that kind of forensic physics.
You really can't. Throw in the suicide note, which was verified not just by a Washington State Patrol forensic document examiner, but deeply personally by Cobain's own mother, Wendy O'Connor.
She actually read it and confirmed it was her son's handwriting.
Yes. And with all of that, the physical evidence is basically a locked door. The science, the timeline, the physics, and the medical biology were entirely unanimous.
Which is why the police closed the case.
Exactly.
But as anyone who pays attention to modern pop culture knows, physical evidence doesn't always win.
Not even close.
If you ever watched internet sleuths dissect a tragic case on Reddit or TikTok, you know exactly how this dynamic works. A massive counter-narrative took hold.
It exploded.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The obsession grew so large that it eventually dragged in the federal government. Among our sources today is a 10-page FBI file on Kurt Cobain that was only recently made public.
It is exceptionally rare for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to compile a file on a closed local suicide.
Yeah, that does not happen every day.
But what's fascinating here is how public obsession can completely detach from forensic reality, creating so much noise that federal agencies are literally forced to respond.
This 10-page file is wild. It contains actual letters sent to the FBI in 2006 by fans, practically begging the Bureau to step in and investigate the Seattle Police Department for covering up a homicide.
And it wasn't just teenagers in their bedrooms sending these letters.
No, the file includes documented communications from Cosgrove Mirror Productions.
And for context, they were the powerhouse creators of the television show Unsolved Mysteries.
Right, a massive national television production company was corresponding with FBI offices in Los Angeles and D.C.
They were amplifying the theories of a private investigator named Tom Grant.
And Grant was the main voice, aggressively peddling the idea that the suicide note wasn't a suicide note at all.
He claimed it was a retirement letter to Cobain's fans, announcing he was leaving the music industry and that someone murdered him before he could leave.
And you can see in these files how the FBI handled this absolute deluge of conspiracy theory. Their response is a masterclass in bureaucratic boundary setting.
They didn't even argue the physics that the shotgun or the biology of the toxicology, did they?
No, they argue jurisdiction. They send out this very polite but very firm boilerplate response.
They explicitly explained to these letter writers that the investigation of homicide or death falls fundamentally under the jurisdiction of state and local authorities.
Like the FBI cannot just take over a local police department's case because a television show thinks it's suspicious.
Right. There must be specific, articulable facts indicating a violation of federal law.
The Bureau's official written response stated, "Based on the information you provided, we are unable to identify any violation of federal law. We are therefore unable to take any investigative action in this case."
Which is the polite federal government way of saying, stop sending us letters. You are wasting our time.
But of course, the public obsession didn't stop. When the internet sleuths realized they couldn't force the FBI to take the case, they pivoted.
The demand for a new investigation morphed into a much darker demand.
They wanted to see the graphic visual evidence of the death scene for themselves. They wanted the photos.
And that transition moves our story out of the realm of forensic science and straight into the courtroom, sparking a profound legal debate about civil rights, privacy, and the Washington State Public Records Act.
Later in this deep dive, we'll talk about a shocking twist in a separate lawsuit nobody saw coming. But first, this brings us to a man named Richard Lee.
Who was he?
He was a local Seattle public access TV host. His show was literally called Now See It, Person to Person. Kurt Cobain was murdered.
Very subtle title.
Right. Lee sued the city of Seattle, attempting to force the police to release those exact same death scene photos that Detective Ciesinski had developed from the rotting 35mm film.
Lee's legal argument was straightforward, though. He said that under the Public Records Act, these photographs were documents held by a city agency.
So they belong to the public.
Therefore, he argued, the public had a statutory right to view them to verify that the police had done their jobs correctly.
But this is where Courtney Love and her daughter, Frances Bean Cobain, stepped in. They intervened in the lawsuit as cross-claimants to legally block the city from handing the photos over.
And the legal argument their lawyers constructed is incredibly powerful. They didn't just ask the judge for a favor.
What did they invoke?
They invoked their privacy rights under Washington common law, and most importantly, they invoked the 14th Amendment's substantive due process rights under the United States Constitution.
This is a vital legal mechanism to understand. When we hear due process, we usually think of fair trials and procedures, right?
Yes, but substantive due process is a constitutional principle that protects certain fundamental rights and liberties from government interference, regardless of what procedures the government uses.
So how does that actually apply to police photos?
The Cobains argued that family members possess a fundamental constitutional right to autonomy over their own private suffering.
Wow, that's heavy.
And a right to be free from severe emotional trauma caused by the government needlessly releasing graphic images of their deceased loved one.
They argue this constitutional right to privacy and human dignity heavily outweighs a citizen's statutory right to government transparency.
And when you read the declarations the family submitted to the court, the human toll of this transparency is just devastating.
Courtney Love stated, "I have never seen these graphic and disturbing images, nor do I ever want to." She knew that if the government released them, they would be on the internet permanently, showing up every time someone searched her name.
The declaration from Frances Bean Cobain is what truly anchors the reality of this case. I mean, imagine you are Frances. You have grown up with the entire world hyperfixated on the worst day of your family's life.
It's unthinkable. She explained to the court that she and her mother were already subjected to a relentless stream of harassment and death threats from disturbed individuals obsessed with her father.
Yes.
In her declaration, she detailed an absolutely chilling incident where a stalker broke into her home while she was away and literally laid in wait for 3 days. 3
That's
days.
just terrifying.
And why? Because this stalker genuinely believed that Kurt Cobain's soul had entered Frances Bean's body.
Unbelievable. Releasing graphic death scene photos into that ecosystem wouldn't just be a breach of privacy.
It would be arming these deeply disturbed individuals with visual ammunition to taunt, harass, and further traumatize the family.
Frances Bean noted she had already been irreparably scarred by seeing fake, mock-up photos online. Releasing the real ones would drastically exacerbate the post-traumatic stress she had endured her entire life.
And thankfully, the Washington Court of Appeals understood this. They ruled permanently in favor of the Cobain family, enjoining the city of Seattle from ever releasing the death scene photographs.
The court utilized very specific, powerful language in their decision.
What did they say?
They ruled that releasing the photos would shock the conscious and offend the community's sense of fair play and decency.
It was a massive legal precedent. The court acknowledged that while internet sleuths might view these photos as a macabre puzzle to be solved, to the family, they depict the violently destroyed body of a father and a husband.
The court also ruled that Cobain's autopsy report and his medical treatment notes regarding his drug use were categorically exempt from disclosure.
It was a total victory for privacy. But, because of the immense, almost gravitational pull of Cobain's cultural footprint, the people connected to him are constantly dragged into bizarre public battles.
It just never ends for them.
Just to show you how relentless this mythologizing is, look at a totally separate lawsuit that was only settled in 2022. Courtney Love was sued by a man named Isaiah Silva, who was the one-time husband of Frances Bean.
Right, and Silva filed a lawsuit claiming that Courtney Love had masterminded a plot to have him kidnapped and potentially murdered.
He alleged that several men broke into his West Hollywood home, impersonating police officers, and dragged him out into a car.
And the motive for this alleged Hollywood kidnapping plot? A guitar.
Not just any guitar. Specifically, the incredibly rare 1959 Martin D18E acoustic guitar that Kurt Cobain played during the legendary 1993 MTV Unplugged performance.
The guitar was a major point of contention in the divorce between Frances Bean and Silva. Silva claimed Love sent a crew to terrorize him into returning it.
Love vehemently denied having anything to do with it, of course.
The lawsuit was eventually settled out of court, and that same acoustic guitar later went to auction and sold for an astonishing $6 million.
$6 million for a piece of wood and wire. It just proves that every single thing he touched has been aggressively mythologized, almost always to the severe detriment of the real, living people left in the wake.
It's a tragic side effect of that level of fame.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a lot of ground today. We started with a 1995 letter asking police to essentially erase history.
We looked at the chemical decay of 35mm film, the biological reality of opiate tolerance, the FBI's strict jurisdictional boundaries, and the constitutional limits of the Public Records Act.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this entire stack of documents tells a profound story about truth versus myth. The forensic evidence regarding this death is firmly scientifically locked in.
The physical geometry of the weapon, the biology of the toxicology, the verified handwriting, it all perfectly aligns with the tragic reality of suicide.
But the cultural weight of Cobain's death is so enormous that a vocal segment of the population will simply never accept the mundane, depressing truth.
And that refusal to accept reality has spawned decades of legal warfare, forcing a family to repeatedly enter courtrooms just to protect their basic human dignity.
Which leaves us with an incredibly heavy thought for you to chew on as we wrap up. When you look back at that original 1995 demand from Courtney Love's lawyer asking the police to hand over the file and keep 0 copies, it sounds completely outrageous at first glance.
It does.
But after learning what her family endured with stalkers, conspiracy theorists, and public obsession for the next 30 years, you completely understand why she asked, don't you?
You understand the desperate protective instinct behind it? Absolutely. It exposes a tension in our modern true crime culture that we really haven't resolved yet.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, when a public figure's life belongs to the world, does their death automatically belong to the public record?
Where exactly is the line between our insatiable curiosity as a society and a family's fundamental human right to privacy in their darkest, most vulnerable moments?
Just because we want to see the catalog index at the public library doesn't always mean we have the moral right to open the book. You've been listening to this deep dive, where we uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.